Hello and welcome to this webinar, which has been set up by Pioneer Medical Europe, relating to the Novacare Maple device. We have a series of Maple User Training Day webinars to bring you up to speed with the theory behind Maple, so that you can watch these mini videos to find out more about how Maple is different, how it's used, how to use it, so that when you come to a basic training day or a demo day, you'll feel more up to speed with the kind of device that you're using, and you'll feel able to get stuck in with the practical use during those days. So my name is Gillian McCabe. I'm a clinical specialist pelvic health physiotherapist, and I qualified from the University of the West of England in Bristol in 2004 and subsequently worked in Cardiff and Vale University Health Board up until 2016. I gained my MSc in pelvic physiotherapy from the University of Bradford in 2015 and started my private practice in 2016, which has now grown to a multi-professional health and wellbeing centre called Station House Health and Wellbeing, where we have a number of pelvic health physios amongst other health professionals, practitioners and trainers. I've been a Maple user since September 2020. So I'm still quite new to the game, but I hope that I can give you some information that you'll find useful. And if you do purchase or think about purchasing a Maple device, you can join the WhatsApp group where we can enjoy clinical discussions, question and answer sessions, and you can enjoy further training days and update days where we can all learn together. So in this webinar, we are going to look at how Maple is different from any other EMS or ES and EMG unit on the market. So we are looking at Maple as specific to the pelvic floor and anal sphincter complex for assessment and rehabilitation treatment. Maple offers both electrical stimulation treatment, EMG assessment, so that's electromyographic assessment, and electromyographic biofeedback training for both vaginal and rectal use. So Maple is different from anything else that is available on the market at present. The finger-sized probe has 24 electrodes. Now, the standard electrodes for the current electrical stimulation or EMG biofeedback devices for the pelvic floor and sphincter quite often will have 2 large electrodes, 3 moderate-sized electrodes, or 4 smaller electrodes. There are no other devices with a probe that has the size of the Maple, the length of the Maple, and the number of electrodes as the Maple. So that's one way that it is different from other devices that are available in the UK, especially at the moment. Its method of use for assessment and treatment, especially for EMG functions, is very different from what is available on the market at the moment. It works in a unipolar rather than a bipolar method of function. Now, unipolar, as you can see from the top right image on your screen, will have an electrode on different muscles. So each muscle will have its own electrode. And those electrodes, instead of comparing findings with each other and sending that information to a machine or a screen, these electrodes with the Maple compare their findings with a zero reference point. So the reference point is an EMG electrode that would sit on a bony part of the body, say the ASIS, the patella, or the medial or lateral malleolus. So you can find the EMG results are specific to each muscle, and you can find different information for different muscles rather than a summary of findings that is then found simply on a graph. So as an example, with a bipolar, using the Piriform Plus as an example, where you have two large electrodes that span multiple muscles. Those two electrodes will combine and compare their scores across the muscles, and you will get a simple line graph that will tell you the average of that muscle activity or underactivity or overactivity within the pelvic floor as a whole. Whereas with the Maple, the individual electrodes will compare their findings with the 0 point, the reference point, and you will get an absolute score for that muscle. And each muscle will be able to give you a differing score, and you will be able to find out which specific muscle is the problem area, whether that be overactivity, underactivity, or other issues within the pelvic floor, but mainly overactivity and underactivity. So the specificity that we get with Maple is one of the main selling points and the main differences of Maple compared to the other devices that are out there. So with the bipolar measurement over one muscle, those findings are still valid and useful for the therapist. So if you have two electrodes on one muscle, and those electrodes compare their findings one with the other and send that information to the device or the screen, the line graph will show you an accurate finding of the level of activity, the electric activity within those muscles, or within that muscle, I should say. However, with the pelvic floor, we know that we're dealing with more than one muscle. Even though it is a muscle group, each muscle will work with individual functions. And we can see with Maple the individual and specific activity levels within each of the 12 pelvic floor muscles if working vaginally. And each of the pelvic floor muscles, apart from the very superficial pelvic floor rectally, but we can see the external anal sphincter activity levels if using the probe rectally. If you are using a device that is using a bipolar measurement function, and those electrodes are spanning more than one muscle, they are then feeding back a summary of information across multiple muscles. So we lose the specificity and we get an average for the muscle group, which is useful in some circumstances, but when we're dealing with asymmetries, for example, after a forceps delivery with episiotomy, we may have an asymmetry between the right and the left pelvic floor, and we would not be able to see in detail what's going on from one side to the other, and we also wouldn't be able to treat one side more so than the other with a bipolar measurement function. However, with Maple, we would be able to do that. So with the unipolar measurement, we get the specific information from each muscle, and we can also treat each muscle specifically. So normally with EMG biofeedback, you will receive information in a simple line graph, and the line will be higher on the graph with more activity and lower on the graph with less activity. However, with the Maple device, because of its specificity, we are able to have an extra view. So we still have the line graph. The line graph gives us the summary information, as similar to a bipolar measurement, but we also get this grid view, and you can see the development of this grid view from the picture here on the screen in front of you. So if we start from the left, you can see the probe is inserted into a cavity, whether that be vaginally or rectally. And you can see a yellow mark along the edge, the front edge of that cube, and that would be the entrance to either the vagina or the rectum, just to locate where the probe is. That cube then is opened out, it's unfolded and turned around, and that then is creating a 2D circle. And that 2D circle includes an anterior, posterior, right and left plate. So with the grid, we can actually zone into the front, the back, and either side of the pelvic floor, and it gives you a very visual feedback of the level of activity within the pelvic floor and rectal area, depending on where the probe is inserted. And you can see from that yellow mark where the outer parts of the vagina or the rectum are. So the yellow mark shows the entrance to the vagina or the rectum. So if we keep going right, you can see there the plates, the anterior, posterior, right and left plates. There's a center point to the grid and there's an outer circle to the grid. So it's almost like you're looking through a tunnel. And with the grid, the smaller the ring, so if you look at the far right grid with the rings included, the inner ring, ring 1, is the deepest point of your probe. And the outer ring, ring 6, is the most superficial part of the probe, which is sitting right at the vaginal or rectal entrance, depending on its insertion point. So you have your plates to locate the front, the back and the sides, and you also have the rings to locate the depth. And this next video will show you how the rings relate to the position of the probe. There's no sound in this video. So hopefully that was clear. Feel free to pause and rewind that video at any point, and you can return and revisit that information at any point in this webinar. The position of the electrodes in relation to the pelvic floor muscles, both vaginally and rectally, have been validated through MRI testing, and that MRI research is found on both the Novacare and Pioneer websites, so feel free to take a look at those. The validation is only present where there is no severe vaginal prolapse present. So in a severe grade 2, grade 3 or grade 4 prolapse on POPQ scoring, the probe should be used rectally in order to maintain the validity of the presence of electrodes next to specific muscles. But in all other cases, the probe will sit specifically next to each muscle. So that's the end of the first webinar. So hopefully you've got an idea now as to how the Maple is different from other electronic devices for the pelvic floor, whether that's EMG biofeedback or electrical stimulation. You can also see the difference in the vaginal and rectal probe, the number of electrodes and the fact that it works in a unipolar way compared to the more common bipolar way. So feel free to review this video or move on to our next video, which will look at how to use the EMG functions of the Maple.